the topic I was given was boosting high-tech manufacturing. So by definition, it means that if we continue to do what we did in the past in the country in terms of high-tech manufacturing, we're not going to be accomplishing much. So I will actually focus more on what do we need to do different going forward if we really need to be really a manufacturing powerhouse in the coming days. Can someone just flip the slides, please? I won't bore you with the slides, but they're just a prop to get the bigger picture. So basically, one thing I feel is that so far in the high-tech manufacturing, we've always been worried about doing what I think is the low end of the whole process. So if you think about mobile manufacturing, which is happening in the country, the amount of value addition is happening is only less than 5%. So instead of importing $100 worth of mobile, now we're importing $95 worth of components, and you're putting $5 worth of manufacturing into it in the country. So when you're only going to do $5 of value addition, that is what you will be distributing in terms of economic wealth or whatever to the country back. So I think this is really the core problem that I wanted to highlight. So coming back to what we really need to do is to transform India more into like a product nation in terms of developing products, which we then of course manufacture as well. And why do we need to do that? Because first of all, if we want to be a developed economy by 2047, which is the stated intent, we have to have, I would say, technology sovereignty. What I mean by that is all the critical pieces of technology that go into building a country, whether it's telecommunication, whether it's space, whether it's automobiles, or pharmaceuticals, medtech, or whatever it is, you have to have control on the technology. And look at what's happening in China. For so many years, they had a free run. And once, certain countries decided that they're getting uncomfortably powerful, they cut off a lot of pieces of the technology, whether it's semiconductors and so on and so forth. I don't think we should make the same mistake. So that's number one, that we have to become a nation which has technology sovereignty. The second thing is the economic valuation. If you're going to talk about manufacturing as a sector which has to come up in the country, it has to come from high-tech manufacturing. And by the way, I'm not talking about the traditional manufacturing of garments and leathers and all the other stuff. That's something for other people to figure out. But in high-tech manufacturing, we have to go for what I call value addition. And if you don't do value addition, as I gave the example of the mobile phone, we're not going to be accomplishing much. So if we have to have a significant growth, if you're going to talk about 7 to 8% economic growth over the next 25 years, you have to plan for much more than that. You have to plan for leapfrogging in certain sectors, because linear growth never happens. There will be some road bumps. Only when you think of leapfrogging, then you will be able to at least get to the 7 to 8% over a compounded period of that time. So I think the value addition with manufacturing is very, very crucial. And then the last part is it's a great opportunity. World is looking for a trusted manufacturing partner, and people are weaning away from China. So there's a huge amount of what I call customer push coming to India as a country to buy a lot of stuff from India which never had before. So where do we focus on? Do we spray the bullets and try to do everything for everybody? I really don't think so. We should look at things which are strategically important, as I said, things which are India-specific use cases where we understand the problem better than anybody in the world. For example, a guy sitting in the Silicon Valley should not even be able to figure out why do you need to do this stuff, versus we are glaring at the problem in India. So I think we need to pick such kind of problems and pick things which are in the sweet spot. For example, India's sweet spot today is not infrastructure, it's not speed of everything, it's not logistics, not so many things, but design is our sweet spot. Half the world's chips are actually designed in Bangalore in terms of the number of people who work on it. So why are we going to be following the classical model of China or Taiwan or Vietnam or Malaysia, where they're focusing on the low end of the problem because they don't have the capabilities where we do have the design capabilities? And really, I think we should be looking at things which are big enough problems. We have to look at 5 or 6 or 7 verticals which are $100 billion in size, so that if even 3 or 4 of them succeed over the next 10 years, we at least have an industry which is going to play out to the right level. So that's what I think we should be doing. Can you keep please flipping the slide so that we don't have to pause? And one other important thing I've learned again from Tejas' experience is that we started telecom equipment and we built the stuff in India, for India first. And the good news is, unlike what was considered in the past, that if you build something and you sell in India, you will say, okay, that's not quote unquote export quality. But in technology and manufacturing, India is the world's toughest market to win. So if you can win in India, if you can make in India at the cost point which the thing sells, You have to have the highest, quality. Nobody buys stuff that is not quality. You have to have latest technology because technology will give you the cost. And of course, you have to be cost competitive. So if you can win in India, you can make a lot of margins in US and Europe in terms of selling the same product at a much higher price. And the Africans will love it because they have similar needs like India. So I think that's really what I think we have an advantage. So in terms of the value chain that we should try to capture in manufacturing, I've given an example for electronics or telecom. I'm pretty sure it is very similar to any other system, whether it's electric vehicle, whether it's entertainment, electronics, or whatever. The real money gets made by the guys who own the product, the guys who design the product, who have the architecture, the brand, and all of that stuff. And that's around 30 to 65% of the product value goes into that. The components, which is the stuff that you buy, you put it all together, probably goes around 30 to 50%. And the actual manufacturing is only about 5 to 15, depending on what kind of products you're doing. For example, in an iPhone, only $7 out of a $699 iPhone is actually going into manufacturing, where the rest of the stuff goes up. So 350 goes into this bucket, and another 200 odd goes into this bucket, and 5 or 7 goes into this. So I think as India, we've had a good start in electronics in terms of the EMS, which is the contract manufacturing, which is low end. But we very quickly need to pick up a lot more components. So for example, why should we be not building bare PCBs in India? Why can't we set a global scale factory? Why can't we do motors, for example, precision motors, which will be needed in electric vehicles, or needed in drones, or needed in anything else? Why can't we build a world scale capacity out of that? Why can't we build displays? Don't try to build all kinds of semiconductors. Pick a few semiconductor chips and say, why don't we build fabless semiconductors there? So that's the way we will increase the value addition in the country. And most importantly, you have to move on from this, low end thing straight away to the products, because that's our sweet spot. And then go down. So we should first build the systems, buying whatever components are available from wherever in the world, then pick and choose which one we should quote unquote indigenize, and then go down. So the traditional model what the Chinese did it, they went from contract manufacturing to white labeling the products. Taiwan is stuck at white labeling. I mean, they did, at least in the electronics, I'm not talking semiconductors. They were contract manufacturers, they got stuck at white labeling. There's no need for India to follow the same path because our sweet spot is different. Next, please. So really, the way it will work out, I think there was one slide before this also, I think. But yeah. So the way I wanted to say is that when we talk about products in manufacturing and technology, there's a lot, since I've been facing that as an industry who came up despite a lot of reservations, the first thing which comes is, oh, we can't do this in India, where are products company in India, where are the success stories? So I just want to say that there are enough success stories. If you look at two verticals, if you look at the software side, the India stack is a success story worldwide, which is now, between the Aadhaar foundational software to all the apps that got built on top. And we're calling this whole thing as a digital public infrastructure because in India, at the best scale in the world and at the lowest cost, we've been able to build a network which is built on completely indigenous equipment. For example, Tejas has supplied all the 4G and 5G equipment which is going to get rolled out into a national network. All the backbones in the country are on our equipment. A lot of the GPON and fiber to the home that you get it, your homes are all running on our equipment. So I think there's enough telecom equipment available which is end-to-end, and Tejas is one of the 4 companies in the world. We are Nokia, Huawei ZTE, which has end-to-end products in telecom from wireless, 4G, 5G to optical to GPON to whatever else. So I think it is possible to do all this stuff at global scale. We are exporting to more than 70 countries around the world. I think the combination of software products and the hardware products, India can go to a country in Africa or whatever and say, you know what? We know what it takes to translate your traditional economy to a digital economy. We'll build a network, we'll give you the whole thing, and we can, the bill for this could, any country, if they're going to do it by themselves, will be anywhere between $500 million to $5 billion. Just look at the kind of export potential we have with products that are available shipping today. And I'm very happy to say that the government of India, including the Prime Minister and the telecom minister, they are all seeing this picture and they are the biggest proponents of saying India is ready to export around the world. This is what I wanted to kind of give a confidence building to a lot of people who said that they wanted to get into manufacturing but are not there, that it is possible and it is doable. Next slide, please. So really, what does it take to now take all the learning and put it into a structured format so that it can be repeated across sectors and across different technology areas? So really, I think two sides have to play a role. The industry, of course, has to be the prime mover. Now, from the industry point of view, what I see is that the mindset among entrepreneurs and investors at large has to change from a quote-unquote safe services mindset to a relatively, but not actually risky product mindset. You have to think of investing ahead in technology, building the product, taking the call on what problem to solve, how to solve, etc., etc., and then go ahead and invest into R&D and build this stuff. And I can say with a lot of confidence that, contrary to what people think that building the product and all that is very difficult, to me, given the kind of technology firepower that exists in the country, we can build whatever products needs to be built. We have enough smart engineers, we have enough ways to do all of that. We can manufacture whatever needs to be manufactured. That's also not the problem. The real problem is selling, because especially in electronics and in products, it's all about economies of scale. You build something and you sell hundreds of it, it costs you X. You build 1 million of that, it costs you 1/10 of X. But the problem is, how do you go from 1 to 1/10 or 100 unless you get the volumes? This is really where the second power of India comes into picture. Our large home market. We are one of the largest consumers of technology products in the world. And we've got to have an ecosystem where we build products which should be world class on global standard. We use the domestic market as a way to kickstart those companies and give them enough businesses that they can scale up and then go global. That has to be the recipe for us to go. Because if you don't do that, it's not going to happen. The second thing I think we should do in terms of building products is that today all industries are a part of a global supply chain. No country or no company can say that everything that I need is completely in my control. So the way we have to be is play very, very smart. As I said earlier, pick and choose the critical areas of technology that we should build. And even in that, if it's a solved problem, for example, and the way the world works, especially the Western world works, every 10 years, for some reasons or the other, it's a very Darwinian culture where a lot of companies, a lot of technology gets created, but they do some kind of a self-code. A lot of companies and businesses are available at almost throwaway prices for us to acquire. And I don't know if many of you may be aware, after the 2007-8 crisis, the Indian auto sector went ahead and acquired tons and tons of OEMs or auto component suppliers in Europe and US who are supplying to the Mercedes and the BMWs and the Audis of the world. And at that stage, you could buy a company in Europe for $10 million, $20 million. Now, that stage, all the investment that the Indian auto component guys did, today, that company which was selling $10 million, $20 million worth of stuff is selling $100 million or $500 million because you had the customer access, you had the incumbency, you had the relationship, and you could bring in all the stuff that you're producing in India and pump into those. Versus, the biggest problem I can tell you from a country perspective for products is, as a country, we are not known in the world as a product nation. We are known as a services nation. You go to any company in the world and say, I'm an IT services company, I can give you the best services, no questions asked, people will do it for you. You say, I have an Indian product. Where is an Indian product of any kind which is known in the world? Any sector. It's not there. So I think as government, as a country, we need to build that brand that India is known for products. Like if you see Koreans, LG, Samsung, those are two brands that come to your mind. You look at China, you look at US. We have to have brands from India with a globe, because without that you can't sell. Customers will give you small businesses, but if you want to build a $1 billion deal, it's not going to happen. Part of, for example, why we got Tata Sons as an investor in Tejas is the best brand of India outside of India is Tata's. And if you go to a large customer or large telecom carrier in US or Europe and say, we are a Tata company, we can, aspire to win a $500 million or $1 billion business. Versus if I were to say Tejas, a good company in India, it would be a very, very hard problem to solve. So that's one part I want to say, that the building of brand is very crucial. Second thing, government has a lot of good policy. Government is moving in the right direction. But those policies need to be fine-tuned. For example, one policy is there which is preference to make in India. And if you ask a lot of startups, what is the number 1, number 2, and number 3 problem? All of it is, I build a great product. There's a big procurement from the government because government is a large buyer for a lot of technologies. Unfortunately, I can't sell because the eligibility conditions are set up such that they are stacked against me and are in favor of quote-unquote proven products from larger companies. I think we want to solve that problem. A lot of those tweaks have been put in, a lot of inputs have gone, government is intent. That's one problem. The second problem is this PLI policy, the production linked incentive. Now, production linked incentive should be linked to the amount of value addition that you do in the country. So, two companies, let's say one is doing 5% value addition and you give 4% production linked incentive. Someone is doing 25% value addition, you still give 4%. I think the motivation to do more value addition has to be there, and that's how those policies need to be tweaked. So I just put some example. R&D funding is very crucial. There's a lot of R&D funding available in the country from different departments, government, and so on and so forth, which goes to academic institutes, to research labs. I think all that needs to be aggregated, and we need to pick few battles which you want to fight hard and put deep funding. You cannot build something very complex over a 2-year, 5-year period. Sometimes require 10 years, 20 years commitment. I don't think we have the scientific mindset or investment mindset in the country to do that. Whereas China comes up with a policy for 15 years, 25 years. So I think we need to have that long-term funding thing. And that's again something which I think the government is getting sensitive to. And the last part is very important. Standards. See, standards is the way you play in the global world. So for example, 5G is already a standard. 6G is going to be a standard which will come out by 2030. So there's still another 7 years to go, right? Now, one thing, thanks to a lot of the stuff that we work from the industry side, now India is playing a very big role in defining what the global 6G standard should be. And because India as a market itself has enough power to say that these are my requirements, why should I take a standard which is defined by the US and the Europeans and adapt it on a suboptimal way for India? I would rather have it saying that Indian standard or Indian aid should be a part of the global standard. For example, even in the context of space, Nayak was put as a requirement that all cell phones should support Nayak, standard which is from the Indian satellite. So I really feel that standards game results into patents, results into early adoption, results into a market leadership. And I think at least in few sectors we are there. Telecom, we are there. Roads is a new sector which is coming up where the global standards have not yet come up. I think great opportunity for India. Two-wheeler electrical vehicles, India's specific problem, which we are seeing it much more clearly than others in the world. Opportunity to come up with new standards, whether it's for automating how the stability of the vehicle can be increased using different kind of technology or whatever else it may be. So I think there are enough problems of the right kind which are visible to us. There's enough large market. There's enough intent by the government. Unless we do all of this, I don't think we can boost manufacturing. But the point is, all of this is known. There's enough success stories, and I'm very confident that we've been engaging with a lot of folks in the government and industry, and everything which I said here has been received very favorably, and the things are moving in the right direction. So that's really where I'll stop. But I'm very confident that going forward, we'll have a lot of product companies from India over the next 10, 20 years, and we look forward to making sure that all the roadblocks that at least we faced for 23 years are not faced by others, and we can fast forward all that into a much better way. Maybe we'll have time for a couple of questions, and then we can pause.
What a start. With this, we'll start for questions. You can raise your hands, introduce yourself, and your questions.
Yeah, I'm Satarish. I work for a startup in machine learning. Very energetic talk. So you mentioned a lot of things, but in addition to investment infrastructure, raw materials, I assume, are a very crucial component. Where does India stand in the raw material business for the high-tech manufacturing semiconductors and so on?
So it depends on what you're talking about. Let's talk the electronic semiconductors as a one bucket, because telecom was subsumed into that. So we don't manufacture any components. So we don't do any semiconductor chips in the country. So the recipe for that is, don't wait for a fab to come out, it will take 5 or 10 years. We should start with fabless semiconductor chips, which are important. And again, as I said, Government of India, actually I was chairing one of the committees, we've recommended 6 chips which are going to be used in very high volumes in the country. And government is willing to fund up to 75% of the development cost of those chips. And they can be done in a fabless semiconductor way. And why I say fabless is very useful. The entire semiconductor industry is about $600 billion per year. Out of which the semiconductor manufacturing, which is what TSMCs and the others do, aggregates about $120 billion. It means you have another $500 billion worth of fabless, which is what India can easily do. So that's one thing. The second and third aspect of the component supply chain, I feel, is doable in the next 24 months. Which is, for example, if we just take the aggregate demand of printed circuit boards, the bare PCBs, which go into everything, anything electronics requires PCB. We still import a majority of those PCBs from abroad. There's no reason why someone can't set up a factory of global scale with 60 layers, 32 layers, whatever you need. And at least if you just cater to the demand in India, your raw material part will be addressed. And then the last part which comes in is what I call electromechanical, because if you look at power industry, you'll have transformers, you'll have some motors, you have all of that stuff. That's not very complicated stuff to do, right? So, I mean, the raw material for that is very, not that complicated. I think it's just a question of intent from people to see that this is something I can build. and there's a large domestic market to get integrated. So I would say some aspects of the supply chain are there, some aren't, but we have enough to still do 50% value addition is what I can say.
Thank you. I would like to ask the next question. So, as you rightly said, innovation truly is the backbone of what impact our product makes in the market. So, at Tejas, when you, and also you mentioned later on that once you have that innovation, you figured out according to price sensitive market in India, then there's an opportunity to go ahead and expand globally. But at Tejas, when you started, when you innovated, and from there when you scale, so how was your journey from 1 to 10?
So I think for a systems or product startup, there are 3 steps or 4 steps I think in the journey which are very crucial. 0 to $10 million, 10 to 100, 100 to 300, and 300 to a billion. I think these are 4 you have to transform yourself many times. So in the 0 to 10 billion or 0 to 10 billion size, I think it's all about thinking of cleverly solving an existing problem in a very different way. So, for example, what Tejas did was when new standards came in. This is 2001 when, I don't know, many of you may remember, we used to buy bandwidth in multiples of 64 kbps, right? So we came up with a technology where you could take, or you had to go to a very big pipe which was 2 Mbps or 128 Mbps, whatever. We came up with a technology where you could map all of this onto an Ethernet port. And then you could, take whatever multiples of 64, but on an Ethernet. That was called whatever, And there was no chips available in the world at that stage for that because it was brand new standard. So we built all that technology on FPGA, which is programmable devices. So we were first in the world in terms of coming with something new. Why that was important for 0 to 10? Because unless you had something very differentiated, why would the customer even give you a chance? You could buy from Nortes, Cisco, Huawei, whatever. So that was one part. Then we went from 10 to 100 million. Then you have to think of how can we actually become more competitive compared to the bigger global guys. So we had 2 competition, Huawei and ZTE from the east, which is government of China, and you have the traditional vendors, the Nortel, the Cisco's, and all these things from the west. So how do you win against both? The customers will ask this question: is your product cheaper than Huawei? And what does your product have that Cisco doesn't have? I mean, I know there's a rocket scientist here, but we are not rocket scientists. I mean, how can you do something which is cheaper than Huawei and better than Cisco with 1/100th or 1,000th of an R&D, right? But you still had to come up with something very unique in that. So we came up with a product architecture which we call software-defined hardware, where the hardware remained same based on a lot of the programmable devices, but you could migrate from one standard to the second standard to the third standard because a lot of the internet was evolving between 2000 to 2010. If you really think of the evolution in terms of the user internet experience, when 2G happened, 3G happened, 4G, a lot of technology got evolved. So could you have a product that you buy and put it in your network for the next 10 years and it keeps evolving as the technology evolves, because you could literally print new hardware on it by using a program. So that took us from 10 to 100 million. 100 to 300 million, you had to go abroad, and that's where we said, where can we go? So we said, let's look at India-like market. So let's look at Africa, because whatever we solved the problem in India, Africa was, or Southeast Asia or other Latin American countries were 2 years behind. So our view of the world of the problems was very similar to the world view that they saw. So it was very easy versus when a US guy would come in such a technology, they couldn't even understand what, for example, I think a very simple thing in Africa or in India, the ruggedness of the equipment has to be very good because it has to be almost idiot-proof. Because somewhere in the village, because our equipment goes up all across the country, right? It's deployed in every village, town, wherever. So the guy who operates that equipment is not very skilled. It has to be idiot-proof, literally. So how do you simplify the technology, dumb it down to the level that a low-level operator can operate it? Was what took us from 100 to 300 in the emerging market. Then we got stuck at $300 million. I mean, somewhere in that range, right? Now, what we figured out is, every country or every telecom equipment industry in the world, no matter where you are, you're from China, you're from US, you're from Europe, unless your home country supports you big time, there's no way you can go. Same is true in aerospace, same is true in defense, same is true in many other technology areas, that your home country has to be a large enough market for you. So then, for us, luckily, we didn't plan for it, but things happen. So the Galwan skirmish happened in 2020, I think, or somewhere around that time, right? And then the Prime Minister decided that telecom is an infrastructure which is so critical for the country and half of the Indian networks, or more than half, are running on Chinese equipment. So what war are we going to fight when the equipment is controlled by someone else and it can easily stupid? So there was a quote unquote mission call that can someone build 4G, 5G equipment, because Tejas was so far only in the wireline side of the equipment. So can someone build, someone they pointed to us, can you guys build up 4G, 5G equipment? I said, yes, we can build whatever, but if I build all this stuff, quote unquote, our business, because we were a listed company by then. So we are kind of assured that if your stuff works, we'll buy. So in 18 months, and that's why I said with confidence that we can build whatever, 18 months we built from scratch a brand new 4G base station and 5G upgradable. We deployed it in the network of BSNL on the same city, 2 cities or 3 cities in North India. In the same sites, 30-40 sites, Nokia equipment was there, ZTE equipment was there, they put our equipment. And like everything in India, they want everything that works for everybody else has to work for our equipment, which we made it work. And once we made it work, we got about $1.5 billion order from BSNL, right, for rolling it out. Now that propels us from 300 to $1 billion, which becomes one of the largest orders. Now once that happened, and I was at Mobile World Congress earlier this year, customers are coming to us and say, you know what, the Europeans are saying that they got the Chinese equipment into European networks because the incumbents, which was Nokia, Ericsson, had become too lazy to innovate aggressively and they were very expensive. And by Chinese coming into those markets, the equipment prices went down, the technological innovation went better. US doesn't have any wireless company left anyway. So now we suddenly had that the customers want us saying, you know what, you are kind of the best of both worlds. You are as competitive as Chinese because you can win in India. You're as innovative as the US guys because, compared to their stuff, you work. So we would like your equipment as an alternate vendor to whatever. And there are programs in the US called rip and replace where all the Chinese equipment has to be replaced out with something which is trusted. So India as a trusted source of products suddenly comes into the limelight. And with that, I feel personally that, company can scale up to global level because in any industry of our kind, if you're not in the top five take 80-90% market share, and I think they have a very good shot to getting into the top 5 in the world. But that's how I know it's a long answer, but hopefully useful for others as well.
That is one impressive journey. Thank you so much. Now I'd like to hand over now.
Madam, question.
If I can make out it is a very successful company. Why it was given to Tata? What was the reason?
Okay, so first of all, let me clarify, it's not given to Tata. We are a publicly listed company since 2017. We are still a publicly listed company. Tata's Sons, any investor has the right to take any amount of equity share that you can buy. So Tata Sons is 54% investor. But I think it's a very important, and that's another thing I want to kind of articulate since you asked the question pointedly. After getting publicly listed, so what happens with entrepreneurs? We say, you know what, IPO is the thing. Once you're listed, you'll have enough cash, you can do whatever, you can scale up. We tried going international, in a big way. The reason we could not be that successful, although our equipment is being sold in 70 countries, is because the brand of India is missing. The balance sheet is missing. When you're trying to win an order which is the $1 billion size and your balance sheet says you're $300 million, the customer is hesitant to give you that business. So once Tata is the investor and we become a Tata company, automatically the brand recognition happens. Customer access is there because companies like TCS, which is a Tata Group company, has access to all the telecom operators in the world. They are doing about $4-5 billion of business with them anyways. We get instant credibility, market access, and most importantly, nobody doubts our balance sheet and nobody thinks we will be around 5 years from today because Tata companies live for 100 years. So I think it's a great thing. So what my advice, in fact, would be, it's always important to see what is the critical success factor. Where are you going to get stuck for the next 5-10 years? And as entrepreneurs, we should not be hung up about holding to everything. It's much better to make the pie much bigger and hopefully have a success around it rather than thinking too internal. So I know it's a different thinking, but it's very important to understand why strategically it's important, because in these critical sectors, you have to have, if you see Boeing, there's only 2 companies in the world which make big aircraft, Boeing and Airbus. So if you don't have and you go to compete with them, you better have some muscle. So that's the answer to your question.
And in fact, I want to take your opinion on. So as you know, India lost the semiconductor first mainly because of not having a world-class fab. Right? So what is your opinion on how we can fill the gap? Is it really important to fill the gap? And we hear a debate saying that we are too late, even to catch up to build a world-class fab, as like Intel's. It's what's your opinion?
So first of all, it is super critical. It's almost mandatory that India has control on semiconductors, because semiconductors are going to be in everything forever, whatever we can see. Unfortunately for India, in 2010, I was a part of a high-level committee. We recommended that India should set up a fab, and all the policies are set up. The problem in India as a country, I'm sorry, is that we always look what can be done in the next 3 to 5 years, because that's the duration of the government. Unfortunately, nothing can be done in 3 to 5 years in deep tech. You take 10 years, maybe 15 years. So for whatever it's worth, the fab didn't come up then. But with all the stuff that the government is doing, now we're taking two calibrated moves as a country. So the answer is we absolutely have to have semiconductor fab, but there's enough intermediate steps. And the 3 intermediate steps are the following. Number 1 is don't, and you have to run the race in all the 3. So please start getting that big fab. So I think we started with one in Gujarat. I think more will come. So that's one part. Second, start with fabless semiconductors, because that is far more valuable. It is India's sweet spot. I feel confident in the next 18 to 24 months we can create critical chips that are needed for India, get them printed at TSMC or whatever else. No problem at all. It can be done, and we can still own 500 out of the 600 worth of value. And then the third part is, even in the fab thing, there are 2 kinds of fab. You can have silicon fabs which are more expensive, especially when you go to the what I call the more latest nodes, or you can go to compound semiconductor fab which are used in power electronics. That doesn't cost you tens of billions of dollars, between 100 to 200, 300 million dollars. You can set up fab for power electronics things. And if you look at, if you just pick that as a vertical, which is what I mentioned, power electronics will be needed in electric vehicles, chargers, telecom equipment, LED lighting, solar, whatever you need it, right? So if you just put a fab for that, so the design for those power electronics is very easy. It's not a complicated thing. Fab is a simpler problem. Start with that. So I think if you fire on all these 3 fuses at the same time, you'll have some results in 24 months, some results in maybe 36 to 48 months, and hopefully a lot more results after 60 months. So I think this time around, hopefully we'll get it right and we'll not miss the bus.